This evening I direct your attention to Luke, the 19th chapter. In verses 11 through 27, we are introduced to the parable that Jesus spoke. And when I come to the parables of Jesus, we say, well, what was Jesus like? What actually did he say? And the parables really give his words. We have the context for the parables, but just listen to the words of Jesus as recorded by Luke. As he heard these things, he added and spoke a parable, because he was nigh to Jerusalem, and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was immediately to appear. He said, therefore a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom, and to return. He called 10 servants, and he gave them 10 pounds, and said unto them, trade ye herewith till I come. But his citizens hated him, and sent an ambassage after him, saying, we will not that this man reign over us. And it came to pass, when he was come back again, having received the kingdom, that he commanded the servants unto whom he had given the money, and he called them that he might know what they had gained by trading. And the first came before him, saying, Lord, thy pound hath made 10 pounds more. And he said to them, well done, thou good servant. Because thou wast found faithful in a very little, therefore you'll have authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, thy pound, Lord, hath made 5 pounds. And he said unto him also, be thou also over 5 cities. Another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared, because thou art an austere man, because thou that which thou layest not down, and thou reapest where thou didst not sow. He said unto him, out of thy own mouth I will judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I am an austere man, taking up that which I laid not down, and reaping that which I did not sow. Then wherefore gavest thou not my money unto the bank? And I at my coming should have required it with interest. And he said to them that stood by, take away from him the pound, and give it unto him that hath 10 pounds. And they said unto him, Lord, he hath 10 pounds. I say unto you that unto every one that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that which he hath shall be taken away from him. But these mine enemies that would not that I should reign over them, bring hither, and slay them before me. This parable sometimes is overlooked because we think we've already heard it. We've heard the parable of the talents a lot in our time. And we think about that in Matthew 25. And this is not that parable. There's some similarities, but there's some differences. And I hope to be able, with you, to understand the differences, because there's 2 lessons. 2 parables, 2 lessons. But my lesson this evening is on this parable. And when we observe the context, apparently they understand that he's been with Zacchaeus. They understand what they had heard about his relationship with Zacchaeus. He came to seek and to save that which is lost, Luke 19:10. And they heard about these things. So that's upon their mind. But the 2 places of interest are Jericho and Jerusalem. And because he was nigh to Jerusalem, Jesus spoke this parable. They thought his kingdom must be immediate. We're looking at the end of his earthly ministry. He's on his way to Jerusalem. And Jericho, everything going up to Jerusalem, he's been there, and he's nigh to Jerusalem, and he knew that the people thought his kingdom is going to be immediately established. And I'm pretty positive that here, who are these people? Could be all the people, could be his disciples. We know his apostles, even after his resurrection, said, you restore the kingdom back to Israel now? In those 40-day periods. I know they did not have the concept of the spiritual kingdom that he had taught them. And he has said that before Pilate. But they thought his kingdom is getting ready to be established. And this parable is telling them, no, it's not. It's not going to happen there. And secondly, he speaks about a nobleman that goes to a far country for the purpose of receiving the kingdom. I think he is setting the stage for himself of how this parable is to be applied. You remember in Daniel, the 7th chapter, verses 13 and 14, that we see, Daniel sees a night vision, and where the Son of Man goes to the Ancient of Days. He's not coming bound from heaven. He's going to the Ancient of Days. And the Bible says that he received a kingdom. He received dominion and glory and a kingdom when he went there. What does that mean? People of all nations are going to be his servants. And his kingdom will not be destroyed. So he has dominion over all people. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. It will be eternal and it will never be destroyed. When does he get the kingdom? Not when he comes back to this earth again. Paul says before the end of time, he will reign. He'll be reigning. And then the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. In 1 Corinthians 15. It's when he went to the Ancient of Days. He went to his Father in heaven. He went in the clouds. And he went there to receive a kingdom. That's what this parable is pointing toward. That he is going to Jerusalem, but it's not the kingdom they think. It's not when he thinks it's going to be, but it's when he ascends to the Ancient of Days. He's going to have to die. He's going to have to be resurrected. It's when he ascends to heaven. And we come to Acts, the 2nd chapter, to see what the Holy Spirit had fulfilled in Jesus Christ and had promised, now is fulfilled. I'm just picking up with verse 30 of Acts 2. When David had written, "Did not leave my soul into Hades." Speaking about the fact that he wasn't talking about David. He's talking about someone else. And he's talking about Jesus Christ. So we pick up in verse 30, "Being therefore a prophet," that's David, "and knowing that God has sworn with an oath to him that the fruit of his loins he would set one upon his throne. He, foreseeing this, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that neither was he left into Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus did God raise up, whereof we are all witnesses. And being therefore by the right hand of God," he's there, "exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit." What Holy Spirit had promised? He's going to have a kingdom when he goes to the Ancient of Days. He's going to be promised that the fruit of thy loins, David, God will set one upon his throne. He's on the Davidic throne. He is on God's throne. He's up in heaven. And he's going to have to go away to receive the kingdom. And he received it, and the gospel could then be preached in his name, as we see in Acts, the 2nd chapter. So in the parable, the nobleman went into a far country, what? To receive a kingdom. Yeah, it's so far, it's heaven. And then he's going to return. He's going to return. We notice in verse 12, he said, "Therefore a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return." And so, as he's going to be going off, he's promising to return. So there'll be leaving to receive a kingdom. There'll be a time frame where people are waiting. And there'll be accountability, that he's going to return again. And that's somewhat similar to the talents. But you notice there'll be a lot of differences. So let's notice the details of this parable. In the story, he has 10 servants. He didn't give one 5 and one 2 and one 1. He gave a pound to each one of the servants. In verse 13, he called 10 servants of his and gave them 10 pounds and said unto them, "Trade ye therewith till I come." Already we see something different. So we need to interpret it differently, even though there's similarities. So each one, I'm assuming each one gets a talent. I mean, it's a pound. And that's a weight of money, just like talent is not talent. It's the weight of money, and we'll see according to what. But that's what we see in verse 13. But there is another class of people. Verse 14 speaks about citizens. His citizens. He's a nobleman going to fire his fellow citizens. They send unto him an ambassador, people, and what do they communicate to him? We will not have this man reign over us. We're not going to have it. And that becomes part of the story too. That's kind of unique. Here are 10 servants. They are in agreement with who he is. And now we see that there's a group of them that says, we will not have him reign over us. And so we began to realize, well, what are we talking about? Let's look at the details of these servants. What about the servants that are submitting unto him? Each one received the same quantity of money. They'll say a pound to each one in verse 13 of Luke 19. Secondly, here's the differences that take place. One servant comes to him and says, thy pound made 10 pounds more. It wasn't about me. Thy pound made 10 pounds more. The second servant says, thy pound made 5 pounds more. So we see that in verses 16, and we also see it in verse 18. And another servant says, here is thy pound. He didn't dig in the hole. He may have it. He said, it's in a napkin. He saved it for him. And those are the distinctions. And we say, well, that's somewhat like the talents, and it's not. And we'll get that to the end of the sermon. But I want us to see what this is. This is the parable of the pounds. This is different. And so we see the events that take place. So we go from there. And the two servants, one produced 10, and the other one with the pound produced 5. He says, and he commends them in verse 17, well done, thou good servant. Because thou hast been faithful in a very little, thou have authority over 10 cities. Here's a nobleman, he has a kingdom. Here is a servant serving him. Now you'll have authority over 10 cities. And I think likewise when we see the one who had here's 5 pounds, you gave me 1, I increased it to 5. Then you will have authority over the 5 cities. And this is what Jesus is saying to us about these two. But the one with the pound is taken away from him and given to the one who had the 10. And there's the question. He's got 10. It seemed to indicate that, hey, he's got already enough. Why don't you share it with someone else? But he says, it's as if I know he's got 10. But to him that hath, he's going to be given more. And all of those things, the idea that we see similar to the talents parable. But he called this man wicked. He called this man wicked by the king in verse 23. Now you tell me where he's put to death. Tell me where he's cast into outer darkness in the parable of the pounds. He's not. He's called wicked. The people that are going to be put to death are those who didn't want him to reign over them. Maybe this one he's a wicked servant. That pound is taken away and given the one with the 10 pounds. And they say, hey, he's already got 10. Or he's got 10. He's got 10. Like I won't share it around with someone else. Somehow that pound, the person who used the pound and the pound increased more and more. He's given another pound to use. Now what does it mean? When we speak about this, everybody is given the same thing. And we're not talking about your talents. I think we're talking about opportunity. Every child of God has been given the gospel. The gospel then becomes part of them. It becomes the word that's in their heart. And God has gone off to receive, the Lord has received the kingdom, and he's done that. And we're in that waiting period. And I think he's telling us that all are given the opportunity. But when you do not take advantage of the opportunity, it's taken away from you. You can't have it back. And I think that's the lesson. It's a simple lesson. We read in two places in Ephesians, the 5th chapter, verse 15 and 16, where we're to walk in wisdom toward them that are without, meaning those who are without, those are the non-Christians. Our daily life, that's just an opportunity right there. That we're living in this world, we're among unbelievers, and we're to walk in wisdom toward them without, redeeming the time. Why? Why should we buy up the time? I can't buy up 24 hours. It's going to be clicking regardless of what I do. Oh, yes, and when you lose your time, then you can't ever get it back. That's fine. But I'm to buy up the opportunity. I redeem the time of opportunity. That is there too in the structure of time. It's talking about your opportunity. And we need to walk in wisdom, buying up the time, because the times are not good in this context. He said the days are evil. The days are evil. I could see you put this on a bumper sticker, because we like to put positive things on a bumper sticker. Redeem the time. Be good stewards of your time. And we just take that verse out of its context, put it on a bumper sticker, said, rah, rah, Christianity's good. Redeem the time, redeem the time, redeem the time. What does it mean? Because it's all great. Everybody likes us. Bring in that opportunity. You work upon all those opportunities. No, it's because the days are evil, and they may be infrequent. There may be days in which people don't like you living the life of a Christian before them. Walk in wisdom. Colossians 4:5, that we are to do that and redeem the time. Redeeming the time is part of walking in wisdom. I believe those passages to say we create sometimes. We can create the opportunities. And then we need to take advantage of them. I was on an airplane this last weekend going to Kansas City for the week. And I sat down, and I'm always, kind of conscious, usually, what do you do for a living? Well, I've got a great opportunity, don't I? But I said, I don't want to be talking all the time to someone. I don't want to be messing up the idea of the message of the gospel because I'm just overbearing and that sort of thing. So I've tried to be patient. And sometimes I think I'm missing an opportunity. The flight was full. Nobody had an empty seat, so a guy sits in the middle seat. And he was from the west part of Houston. He'd gone to Kansas City. He's a grain elevator safety guy. And they're having a big nationwide convention there. And he liked to talk. So I said, well, he talked about what he did. He said, what do you do? So I preach. He said, where do you preach? I said, Parkview Church of Christ there in Pasadena. And I didn't want to, I just left it like that. And he left it like that too. I said, oh no, I think I've just missed out my opportunity. Maybe I need to be talking more. Where do you go to church? I didn't do that. But did you know 5 to 10 minutes later, after we got our peanuts and whatever, he said, let me ask you about your church. And we had a long discussion. Had a long discussion about what makes us different from the denominations. I've heard that you were. And I got to talk to him about that. And we talked about appointing elders in every church, and denominations don't have that. Talked about our music. And he said, well, that's kind of a problem with me because I've been playing the church band for 16 years, and I like it. I said, I think you do. I'm sure you do. But we had a discussion about that. I feel like I used my opportunity and I walked in wisdom because he was always wanting to know more. And before it was over, when he said goodbye, he said, I hope your meeting goes well. Sitting at a restaurant this week, the lady comes, and I was with two or three couples, and of course, Olive Garden, and they bring the wine out first. And they set it down there. They don't ask you. They set it down there. Say, y'all going to like this? And I made a mistake one time with a preacher when I went to Olive Garden. I was kind of being joking. I said, oh, not today. Oh, don't do that in front of a preacher. He's never let me live it down. Oh, not today, Jerry. That's because I'm here with you. Other times you have it, other times. And I learned that. I walk in wisdom. I don't say anything. Of course, I let the people that take me out and said, no, we're not going to have any of that. And they took it away. But then I wondered, here was a girl, she was talking about a lot of things, and she came a little bit later and said, where y'all going tonight? Because it was hailing outside. Kansas City, it's hailing and rainy. And no one said anything. I said, we're going to church. And she never did follow up on that one. Well, I at least tried. And it just blew over her, and she just being nice, but she wasn't too much interested in things. But I felt like, here's opportunities that come. And what this parable says, everyone in this audience has been given an opportunity. It may be with your own kids. It may be with your own family. How have you used that opportunity for the glory of the King, Jesus Christ? It's not like, well, you got to be out here winning souls with personal work. That's part of it. I'm an evangelist. I need to be trying to do that. And God's going to hold me responsible in a heavier judgment because I am a teacher. But I pray for opportunities and try to use them. I use them everywhere where I go because I've been given it. And you've been given it. And it may not be, a lot of times, this may be encouraging someone in your family to make progress in the gospel. And you've allowed your children to know that gospel. And you've influenced people at work just to be interested in spiritual things. And I've talked about our young people. I know you have opportunities at school. The people see the character that you have, and you're out there a lot of times given an opportunity to answer Bible questions, answer spiritual questions. And when people get past 12 years of age, they're thinking about things. And sometimes us older ones say, oh, nobody's interested. There's a young generation. Their heart's tender. And when you at a tender age are able to live that life before them, you've been given an opportunity. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, and you buy up those opportunities. I think that's the message of this parable. What about those who said, you're not going to rule over me? So we're going to rule. We're going to be serving the Lord, and we like his kingdom, and we've been talking about that. But his citizens, you will not rule over us. What happens to them? Verse 27, bring hither. It's the idea, he received a kingdom. He's over all nations, Daniel 7, 13 and 14. He's in control, and maybe they didn't want him to be their king. But too bad. He has authority over them. Bring them hither and slay them before me. That's who's put to death in this parable. Those who refuse to be ruled by Jesus Christ. He is that rock that we can build upon, and He is that rock that's going to crush us. You will have to deal with Jesus. And sometimes people think, well, Jesus is interesting. I kind of like his parables. I like the story. I like to read stories, and see what, try to find out what was he trying to teach. But I could kind of take him or leave him. It's not real imperative in my life to ever allow him to be ruling over me, as if you can just accept him. If you want to be a Christian, do so. If not, it's okay. That's not the way it works with Jesus. Every knee shall bow and shall confess who he is. And we'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:21, to give an answer what we've done in the body, whether it be good or evil. This is sobering. You are going to be standing and be made manifest. You're not going to have a secret judgment. Say, God, just judge me behind closed doors. Or as if you can hide behind someone else. You're going to be up there on his judgment seat. Pilate, Jesus was on Pilate's judgment seat. Pilate's going to be on his judgment seat one day. Like to be in his shoes? What about those who thought they could just get by in life without submitting to Jesus Christ? You're not going to rule over me. I'll just look at you from afar. That will not cut it, because bring them hither and slay them before me. That's the king. Jesus never allows us to take a middle road with him. He just doesn't do that. He doesn't do in this parable. He doesn't do in his teaching. He does not with me is against me. He that doth not gathereth with me scattereth. Why call me Lord, Lord? Luke 6:46, and do not the things that I say. And yet, he is Lord. He's a Lord of lords, a King of kings. And so here in this story, you don't read death and the talents. Here's dealing with his kingship, and he's off to receive the kingdom, and it comes down to this day of reckoning that we see. Now, I'd like to close by looking at the contrast in the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents. You say, well, talents, that means everybody has talent. Notice in verse 15 of Matthew 25, he gave, the 5 talents according to their ability. The talents are not the ability. That's the way we interpret it. You've got ability. Oh, I've got talent. No. You're giving the weight of money just like the pound is given. But the pound was given every one, that which I think is the opportunity. But here in the talents is that you're given a weight of money according to your ability to be able to use them. And that becomes a very important responsibility, because that has happened as well. You may not have the ability of the 5 talent money guy that has his. But isn't it interesting that the one who had 5 talents, had that much money, had 2 talents? They increased those things 100%. But notice how they said it. I have gained other talents. That's not in the pounds. Your pound has gained 10 pounds. Your pound has gained 5 pounds. I have gained. I had the ability. I'm using my ability, Lord, to turn that weight of money that you gave me, just like the pound is a weight of money, but the pound is the opportunity, And now the talents is given according to our ability. And who dies in this one? Oh, he tried to hide his talent. What's equal to both of them? You know, I'll use your own words against you in the parable of the pounds. If you thought I was all so austere, you should have been given that pound to the banks, and that I would require, see, he's keen, I would require interest. You see that similar with the talents. But he said, thou wicked and slothful. Sir, I thought he said that to the pound guy too. Yes, he did. But he tells you what I'm going to do with the wicked and slothful servant. You take that pound and give it to one who created the most, and you throw him into the outer darkness. There's that weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't see that with the parable of the pounds. Jesus didn't say that. And what he took away from him was the opportunity that he can never buy back. In that sense, he's wicked. And I think the story tells us that we should be so alert to those opportunities. Our time is so short upon this earth that be conscious of that. You can never have that opportunity that you've been given back. But here was the personal responsibility, and I gave you the amount of money according to your ability. You may not be like the 5 and the 2, but you had the ability to deal with the 1. And you were slothful and wicked. Outer darkness for you, because that's based upon our ability. I gained other talents. It's about me, of what I was able to do with my opportunities. What the pounds is I've given each one of you an opportunity. And that opportunity will be taken away from you. And those who take advantage of their opportunities, of spreading the gospel, getting that teaching of the gospel into other people, he'll give you more. He'll give you more. And I think that's the message that we're observing today. Now, the question is, look at verse 28. When he had thus spoken, he went on before, going up to Jerusalem. I think he leaves us there. We know he's going from Jericho up to Jerusalem. We know what's going to happen in Jerusalem. He's going to die. He's going to be resurrected. He's going to ascend up on high and receive his kingdom. And the question is, what are you doing with your opportunity? Because we're in that waiting period right now, every one of us. And I hope tomorrow when you rise to hope a sunny day, you realize I'm a Christian. I've been given opportunity because I have this gospel in my heart. It's in my life. And I have an opportunity to reach others. God, open those doors for me and help me to realize my responsibility. And you know what? I just get that gospel in their heart. It will produce more. Thy pound produced 10. Thy pound. It's a wonderful message. This is good news. And the darker our world is, don't be ashamed of this restricted word. The darker our world is, the brighter the light of the gospel is. And you may come across people who are just down and hopeless. And you got a message of hope. You got a message of improvement. You got a message that gives someone something to live for, a faith to live by, a self to live with forgiveness. And you've got that. Share it whenever you can. And I think you'll be taking care of what God's given you, that one opportunity everybody has. That's the same. But then you'll also be developing your own abilities to be given more for the Lord. And that's the way we ought to conduct our lives. The lesson is yours. I hope you'll know the difference between the parable of the pounds and the parable of the talents and realize how do they both relate to opportunities. And I hope that'll make you a better Christian. Those of you in the audience who are not Christians, we encourage you, I will say it again, just because you Might not say, I want to serve Jesus. Don't think you won't have to bow your knee to him. Why don't you serve him now while you have this opportunity? Obey the gospel as we stand and as we sing.